right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Resident Skeptics. I am your host. I'm not going to say my name because you should already know. And there's the other host up there. Today we have a very special guest. Like I say every time, and it'll annoy Connor so much. But every guest is special because they all bring something different to the table, and they bring experience that we simply don't have. And today we have the pleasure of talking to Tyler Lee, who is running for U.S. Congress for NC District 12. Now, while Connor and I are here splashing in the puddles of our own making, Tyler Lee has been making some pretty big waves in the media. Hope you guys like what I did there. I don't know. Listen, maybe I've been practicing that for a while. We don't know, okay? But Tyler has been doing some really awesome stuff, and we're going to get into as much of it as Tyler is willing to talk to us about. So, Tyler, thank you so much for being here and talking with us today.
Thank y'all tonight, whatever you want.
I think there might have been a freeze on my end, so I might have made like an awkward, weird pause. So if I did,
there was a bit of a freeze on Tyler's end, but it's come
is
back
there a
now.
freeze? Perfect, awesome.
There's a freeze on mine.
Yeah, you're back though. You're back. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, you're good. You're good to go. So just for people who might not know who you are, just tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll kind of go from there.
Well, I'm honored to be the Republican nominee for U.S. Congress District 12, which covers North Mecklenburg County and Cabarrus County. But I grew up in Danville, Virginia. I attended Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia, and then I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina 10 years ago. And I have been a businessman since I graduated from Liberty. I've been involved in many different forms of businesses, but I tell you what, the way the direction of the country has been going, especially the last 2 years, I felt like I was being called out by God to run for Congress, and we won the nomination in May. So we're really blessed to be here. I'm really excited. God's been doing some big things in the campaign and using us, and I'm really excited for the next few weeks as we approach Election Day.
Yeah, no, it's coming up. It's coming up fast, man. I tell you what, I know there's going to be, I feel like we're already starting to see it, just a lot of like new political attacks, censoring on social media. So there's definitely a lot of work to be done. But before we kind of get into, your campaign and just I hate even calling it campaign, but just some of the key things that you're really passionate about and just the reasons why you're running. Just tell us. I know you said you felt like you were called to, but can you kind of get into a little bit more detail about how that happened and why you're choosing to run?
Well, it was January of 2021. I remember very clearly feeling the calling to run for office. And at the time, I didn't really know the difference in the House of Representatives or even the Senate. But I felt like I was being called to go to the House, and I sat on it for 2 months. I really didn't want to go into politics at the time. I'm probably the only political candidate in the state, if not the country, that'll tell you that, because most people they dream of this job. But I was really content, really comfortable in the business world. I was doing really well, and things were happening. And who really wants to leave that behind and go into politics, and put a target on your back? But I
Yep.
felt like that's what God was calling me to do. I was getting too comfortable in the business world, and we need people that will step up, that love the country, that actually want to serve people. I feel like politicians on both sides of the aisle for a long time now have just not represented our voice in DC. And we need patriots to stand up, that come out of the private sector, that aren't already bought and paid for, and who would just do what's best for their constituents and what's best for the country. So I finally answered the call. We launched summer of 2021, and it's been a crazy ride since then. God's really blessed us. Even at the time that I launched, we didn't even have a district, but I knew I was supposed to run, and here we are, District 12. I knew this is where we needed to be, and there's a really good chance to flip this seat red for the first time in its history now.
Really. So who's currently in the seat?
It's an incumbent Democrat, Alma Adams, and she's a Biden Pelosi puppet. That's the best way I could explain her. So she really, if you ever ask anybody about Alma, they'll tell you two things. They either know that she wears hats or that she's renamed a post office. That's about it. They can't tell you any success stories. So
Wait, she
um,
renamed a post office?
apparently, she renamed a post office. So that's the
Okay.
only two. That's
Okay.
the only two things
All
I've ever
right.
heard about her. But she votes with her party majority of the time, and as we all know, they're failing policies that she votes for. So she's in her mid 70s, and it's time for her to go. I mean, we hear from even Democrats that they tell us it's time for her to retire and go spend time with the grandkids, and I agree. And so we're gonna have a retirement party for her on November 8th.
Hey, there you go. I know there's been kind of this I feel like tell me if you think this. I feel like there's been a movement kind of in the Republican Party for new blood, if that makes sense, where I feel like a lot of our politicians, like even on both the left and the right, they're both like, they're all very old, I guess is the best way of putting it. I mean, even look at our president. Our president's very old. Even Trump is pretty old. He's a bit more spry than Biden, I would say. But it's really refreshing to see young people actually stand up for their country and want to get involved in politics instead of having like the same people that have been in politics for decades at this point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I think we've kind of seen the way the country has gone with these people at the helm, and so now we're telling them to move aside. It's our turn. So we're going to fix this, and there's a huge movement going on across the country. You see a lot of young people. I think we used to view it like, well, that's an impossible thing to do is run for Congress, but honestly, I tell you what, when you're called to do it, the Red Sea has parted, and it's happening. I mean, people are waking
Mhm.
up, they're fed up. And I tell you, the line in the sand for me, I share this with everyone, was when our churches were shut down in
Mm.
2020 from during COVID. Our freedom of religion was under attack. That's a constitutional right, but it's also a God-given right, no matter what the government says. And but a mile down the road, we had a strip club and an abortion clinic and a liquor store open, and
Mhm.
that was concerning to me to see that the media and our governor would scream, "Oh, you're super spreaders," when you're trying to reopen your doors to your church, yet the club is open. I watched BLM riot and try to burn down the city of
Mm-hmm.
Charlotte. I was there to watch it. I wasn't partaking. I was just watching it because I wanted to understand what was happening. And I have a video on my phone of a gentleman trying to burn down the Panera Bread downtown Charlotte on College Street. And again, the media and the governor, they allowed it to happen. They didn't call them super spreaders. So I just thought, if politicians are deciding who's essential and who's non-essential, it's time for new blood, and we need people that are actually going to go to DC and fight for us.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that, Connor.
Yeah, no, I think we saw during COVID just a complete overreach of politicians that, especially the ones that have been in for a long time. And I'm looking at Alma Adams when she came in. It looks like she came in around 2014. Is that right? So she's been
That's
in
right.
for
Mhm.
8 years now, and which is that's quite a long time. And I do think that Jordan had a point when she said, a lot of the politicians we're looking at these days are much older, and they seem to be taking more drastic measures.
Very. And a lot of them made a lot of money during COVID. So we believe that this was intentional, and it has. We were under a national state of emergency. I believe we still are, and it falls under the
Oh.
Patriot Act. Falls under the Patriot Act, and they're able to just ram stuff through Congress because of this. It gives them unlimited powers, and they're getting away with a lot of crooked things right now. So we've got to put a stop to that, and I believe we will if Republicans show up to vote. There's no red wave without people. We can't get arrogant and think this
Mm.
is going to happen. I mean, people still have to show up and vote, and not be afraid.
Well, what do you, at just your opinion, what do you think is some of the deterrents for Republicans not coming out to vote?
That's a question I ask myself every day. I spoke to one on the phone the other day, and they just said we're not voting, and I'm like, are you looking at your 401k? Are you paying for gas? Or do you live on the same planet that we live on? Why wouldn't you vote at
Yep.
this point? And it's a shame that some of them I don't have a good answer for that because I'm scratching my head on it. But I also believe that there are people that I think they will come out to vote. I believe that they will. I believe there is a red wave, but I just want to remind people, don't sit at home. Your vote does matter. Every vote counts, especially in District 12. It has not been a competitive district for Republicans in maybe ever until they redrew these lines in February, which were gerrymandered and unconstitutional. But I will say, if there was a plus that came out of it, District 12 was weakened, and Alma Adams is now ripe for the picking.
Yeah. Um, and another question based off of that, for some people, and this is an area I'm kind of weak too. What exactly is the motivation for redistricting? What exactly does the Democratic Party or the Republican Party have to gain from that happening?
Well, every 10 years, a census is done and populations change, whether positively or negatively. So they have to redraw these lines every 10 years anyways. But each side wants to draw the maps that are more favorable to them. So when Republicans control the state house, the Democrats scream they're unconstitutional. You gerrymandered, and then vice versa. And but our state constitution, states that the state legislators are the ones that draw these maps, and Republicans do control that. So this was decided in the court system by believe a 3 or 4 panel judge, and it was unconstitutional the way that it was decided. So
Oh,
that's the
okay.
battle right now. Is we're running in districts that were decided unconstitutionally, and so I believe the case is being heard in the Supreme Court this month.
Oh, wow. Wow, yeah, I would have never I didn't even know that. That's really
Yeah,
interesting.
so they will
Had no
be
idea.
redrawn again. So they will be redrawn. The 2024 maps will be different from what we have now. So it's a total mess. I mean, it really is.
You said they're normally
Wow.
redrawn every 10 years or so.
Every 10 years.
So this is going to happen about half that time then.
So you have, I believe there's 745,000 are allowed per district, people per district. So, as like say the Charlotte area has grown, they had to split Mecklenburg County,
Mm-hmm.
and so because they can't fit, that district can't fit all of Charlotte anymore.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's really interesting. I never, I guess, haven't really thought about that too much. That's probably one area where, well, there's a few areas that I'm a little weak, but that one is definitely interesting to me. But let's go ahead and kind of get into, I guess, some of the reasons why you're running in regards to your key points. So go ahead and just talk us through some of the points that you're focusing on. Because we have, you kind of mentioned with the Republican voter that you're kind of like, are you serious? Do you see what's happening? Like, do you see what's happening with the economy? Are you looking at how much gas is? Are you looking at your 401k? What are some big issues that you're seeing right now that you think Americans are really concerned about?
Well, we're running a national campaign on a local level. That's how we've approached this. The GOP has their talking points nationwide, but for us, what we see in District 12, and this is nationwide as well, is inflation is number one right now. People are going to vote with their wallets. So when you're paying $4, $5, $6 a gallon gas, and you're having to go get a second or a third job, that takes away from your family time, being able to raise a family, doing activities that you like. People vote with their wallet, and so that's a big one right now. Secondly, is crime. When the Democrats were screaming defund the police 2 years ago, that killed morale, and it also put a target on our men and women who are in the police force. It put a target on their back, and so that has killed morale. And so, like Charlotte alone, CMPD, our chief of police says they will be down 1,300 officers by the end of the year. So when you call 911, less of a response time, or a longer response time, And so we see crime on the rise. Plus, Democrats don't believe in law and order, and so criminals are being put back on the street that should not be put back on the street. So that's number two. Number three, what we hear is parental rights and school choice. Right, we're dealing with in schools right now, public libraries, parks. We're dealing with these drag queen story hours. We're dealing with CRT. If people are familiar with CRT, it's claiming that if you're white, you're the oppressor. If you're black, you're the oppressed, and it's pitting people against each other. And these kids at a young age, they're so impressionable, and so this is, it's what Hitler did. I mean, he knew if he could indoctrinate young kids, they would grow up and believe the way he did. So that's what we're seeing right here in our own school system. It's a real thing that's happening. So parents are very concerned. Their tax dollars are funding this, and they don't like it. So they're pulling their kids out to either homeschool or send them places like my church just started a private school for this reason, to ensure that kids are taught reading, writing, math, real science, history. So that's what we're seeing right now. That's a big topic. Now, how that relates to Congress is we have the Department of Education. We do in the Department of Education send a small percentage of money to the states, but I want to ensure that the federal government is not weaponizing, using these agencies to weaponize. So if our funds are going to the state level and it is indoctrinating these kids with this propaganda, then we're going to pull the funding. That's what I intend to do.
Yeah. No, that's kind of like one of the main things. You actually said a lot of stuff there that I think is worth unpacking. I kind of want to talk first about the crime, because that's a pretty big deal. And I've talked to some people in the police department, and there is a morale issue, and there is this fear that pretty much it was described as walking on eggshells. Was the term that was used, that if I just do one thing wrong, or if someone takes a video out of context and they have no idea what's going on, then I'm gonna get in trouble. And of course, we know that police officers, people in our law enforcement, you can even put teachers in there, but that's a different conversation. Are they're not paid an awful lot. They're not paid a lot, and they're dealing with a lot of crap, to put it very generally and very bluntly. And so, kind of on the more like federal level, if you're in Congress, what are some like practical suggestions that you've kind of been working through of how to kind of help with the crime, kind of bring up morale with police officers? Because this is kind of, I feel like this happens around election seasons where everyone starts to hate police, and that can kind of happen. That's just kind of from my perspective. What are your thoughts, Tyler?
Well, indirectly, what most people don't realize, especially in the Charlotte metropolitan area, is the border is a big issue. A lot of our crime indirectly comes from the border, and I'll tell you why. Charlotte is one of the largest cities that has an issue with human trafficking. And human trafficking is
Mm-hmm.
a huge money making business at the border. We have two, unless this has changed, CMPD had two officers, and they were also helping Cabarrus County. Two officers to, I think it's 500-600 cases. Don't quote me on that, but it's a large amount of cases every year for human trafficking. So we have two officers that were designated to this um, human trafficking cases. So that's huge. So if we can secure the border, that can stop that. 150 people a day in this country overdose from fentanyl. That's a huge drug problem that we're having. Again, 90% of that comes from the border. So we can, as Congress, we can eliminate a lot of this crime just by securing our border and understanding who's coming across the border. We have terrorists, we have rapists, we have murderers. There are criminals, and there are good people that do come across the border as well. But we need to know who they all are, and so that's a way in Congress that we can immediately rectify the situation.
No,
Yeah,
I've
it's a
got to
big deal.
ask because one of President Trump's big things when he was running was to build the wall, make Mexico pay for it, and he was pretty big on securing the borders. What was it that ultimately led to him failing to be able to do that? aside from not getting a second term, and what do you think would change with you getting into Congress? What could you guys do that he wasn't able to?
Yeah, I mean, I believe if I remember right, when Trump first got into office, the Republicans controlled everything. But it's again, it's the
Mhm.
establishment, it's the rhinos. They were all against him, and he couldn't accomplish what he really wanted to accomplish. So this is not going to be a fix overnight. I tell people this: you can get me elected, but do not expect us to save America overnight. My goal, I don't think there's much I can do personally aside from screaming at the top of my lungs that something's wrong. But my goal will be to find and recruit people like myself all over the country, and then you will see that change in leadership over the next couple of election cycles. But this is not going to be a fix in 2024 2026. We have to find people like myself all around the country who legitimately love to serve people. They're not in it for the power. They're not in it for the money, the title. They want to serve their constituents, and then they want to go back to the private sector. They don't want to be there long term. So that's my goal, is to raise up the next generation of leaders, and then get myself out of the way.
So it really is, you're really running on the idea of just kind of getting the old blood or the old guard out of our government and getting some fresh blood in, some new faces, new people, and just kind of cycle out this establishment.
Absolutely, because what I've learned in the last year and a half is the ones that sound good on TV aren't always the best ones. They know what to say,
Mm.
but their fruits behind the scenes don't align with what they're saying. So I'm really, really iffy on, until I get to know the person, you know, supporting them and getting behind them. So I tell you what, it's been disappointing to see behind the scenes and see some of the people and how they are. So many of them, I don't think have the best interest for their constituents or for America. um, Politicians just seem to work for those votes, and they want to say the right thing just to get reelected. And for me, at the end of the day, I'm a winner no matter what, right? I mean, this is not, as I said earlier, this was not my dream job, but it needs to be done. And so it's hard to buy off somebody that really didn't want the job in the first place, right? So, but
Yeah.
don't get me
No,
wrong, I'm
that's
honored
that's
to be here. I
interesting.
don't want people to think I'm not. I'm honored to be here, and this is my calling. But my ultimate goal in life is to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So you're
Yeah.
not in it to be a lifetime politician.
Absolutely not. I think talking to people, you need 6, 8, maybe 10 years in Congress to get things done. So we'll let the constituents decide. I'm all for term limits.
I was about to ask. I was like, how do
A
you feel
huge
about term limits?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just don't know what that timeline looks like, but I've heard you need up to a decade. But we'll see. I mean, if you get the right people in there, like I said, you can continue to raise up new leaders and continue to, do things that benefit Americans. So we're just a pretty face. I mean, if at the end of the day. So if we have good policies in place, we want the next person to carry them out.
Yeah. And I think what you're talking about is interesting because I was actually going to ask you about term limits because we were looking you up and we're like a Republican that wants term limits. Like from what I've heard, at least talking to some people that I won't name, is that even there's also plenty of Republicans that don't want term limits because they want to stay in longer. So I feel like from what I've seen, it's a problem on both sides. So to come out and say that pretty boldly is to me, I wasn't prepared for that. But kind of what you're saying is very it's very realistic. Even saying like, listen, I'm not going to save America. It's going to take other people as well to do this. Like this is going to be a team effort, and I think for a lot of people, um, they're used to the really grand claims and that I can do all these amazing things for you. But I think we're getting to a point where we've had so many politicians give us so many grand lies and these grand promises that the idea of doing something realistic, such as, building a team together, seems much more promising than just kind of these big lies that you hear a lot of politicians putting out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, we're just here to speak truth, and we're being reactive to decades of just stuff that has been slid under the rug. These backdoor deals. We can't fix it overnight. I mean, it, I wish we could. I wish I could give hope and say we can get in there in 2 years and fix everything, but it's a people business. A lot of the corruption you see is staffers on you know these politicians' teams, the politicians themselves. So it's not just the politicians. There are tens of thousands of people that we have to get out of there behind the scenes as well. I think that was President Trump's some of his biggest hurdles were the people pulling the strings behind the scenes too. And I think they underestimated that. I don't think they were prepared for that. I spoke to a CIA agent a few months ago, and he told me that. He said, "Look, I deal with more staffers. That's where the problem area is, more so than even the
Mm,
politicians."
that's
And that's
interesting.
coming from a CIA
Hmm.
agent. So that's the reality of what's happening. You've got decades and decades of corruption that cannot be fixed overnight, and we're at a breaking point though. I mean, we don't have many more election cycles until we completely lose this country. And I'm not just saying that to scare people. I mean, we might be maybe 10 years away from losing this country.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think you're saying what a lot of people are kind of scared of, that we watch our country falling apart. I was talking to someone about this. I'm always talking to people about politics. I never stop. But he was basically, it was like a quote from Socrates, Plato. It was someone like that, where the more laws, need more laws, um, the more lawless the society becomes. And so, for example, this kind of brings in the point of Drag Queen Story Hour, which has made its way around America. And we had one that happened here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and you decided you were going to get very involved. So, can you just kind of unpack that story for us and just talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, it blew up so fast. It was wild. I tell you, I remember being on Instagram one night. It was probably a Tuesday or Wednesday night. Somebody posted that there was story hour for all ages, performed by drag queens in Romere Bearden Park, which, for those who aren't in the Charlotte area, it's a park over by right in the middle of uptown Charlotte, next to our ballpark. Beautiful park, funded by taxpayers, and I just couldn't believe it. And I remember 3 years ago, Spartanburg, South Carolina, about an hour south of Charlotte. I remember hearing
Mhm.
about Drag Queen Story Hour. It was protested, and I remember laughing it off, like, who cares, right? It's at a library, whatever. But now what we've seen is it's exactly what Satan does. He takes something and disguises it to look appealing. And I'm not here to tell somebody how to live their life, right? If you want to go play dress up, you do it in the privacy of your own home or leave children out of it. So that was my problem, was it said story hour for all ages. And we know most of them read content because what they want to do is normalize their behavior. Accept me. I'm a woman and dress as a man, or vice versa. I want you to accept me. Or, if you feel the same, you should be this way too. And they're trying to normalize this behavior, and it's not okay. It's wrong. And so I said, you know what? We'll go protest it this weekend. And I emailed city council. We have 2 Republicans and I think 7 Democrats on city council. Emailed
Hmm.
them. Didn't hear back from the Republicans. Um, but I heard back from one of the most radical left on the board on the city council, and she said, well, most pedophiles in parks are white heterosexual males that are, 30 years old and up or something. And I felt like that was a shot at me. It seemed to describe me, and I'm far from that. But I just asked them, like, why are you allowing this to happen on taxpayer funded property? When I was growing up, we were told pedophiles preyed on children in parks. So, don't talk to strangers, be aware of your surroundings. And now we're allowing this on our taxpayer funded dollars. So, me and a group of it was very last minute. We decided on Friday night, and me and a group of probably 15 people went down on Saturday, and boy, we were outnumbered, probably 10-1. And we were very respectful. But I tell you, as we were entering the park, there was a Planned Parenthood employee that tried to block the entrance to the park with her stroller, and we had to push through her. Then we got to the park, and we were met with park rangers and hired security. So they were prepared for us, because leading up to that, the media had come after me and attacked me for this. I mean, it blew up pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
We were very respectful. We stood there, but then the crowd got in our face. They started cussing at us, throwing the middle finger at us, just everything. And across the way, there's a gentleman in Charlotte that stands on the corner of Trade and Tryon regularly, and he yells, "Jesus saves." Well, they were doing the same to him, so he started screaming at the top of his lungs, "Jesus saves," holding his sign. And that got our crowd engaged, and we all started chanting back and forth, drowning out the drag queen who was doing the story hour. Then they finally got us settled back down. Security did. But we watched this happen. I took video. The videos went viral. I mean, it had hundreds of thousands of views online between all of our videos. It was just unbelievable what we were seeing. And I was so disappointed to see the parents that were there. That was the disappointing part. I mean, they have every right to raise their child how they want, but to see how many parents allowed their children there. And I don't know if they're just ignorant and don't realize the content that these drag queens are reading. But that was what was disappointing. So we left the park that day, didn't know what was going to happen. And I went to church on Sunday morning for our first service. Drag queen story hours at 11 o'clock. So I left first service with about half a dozen other guys. We went to Uptown Charlotte, and we showed up to the park, and nobody was there. And it's on a Facebook Live video. I mean, I was like, what is going on? And 3 or 4 blocks before that, as we were walking to the park, we passed a woman that we recognized from the day before in this rainbow tutu. And I was like, she's going the wrong way. I mean, she's far off the beaten path. What is she doing? So when we got to the park, nobody was there. And the event staff told us it had been canceled. So we were like, praise God, like it worked. We didn't expect that.
That's awesome.
And so we claimed victory on that. So following up with that, on Monday, I reached out to our state legislators, and I sent an email to every one of them, and I asked them to do 2 things. I said, please draw up legislation that prohibits drag queens from performing in public places that are funded by taxpayers, schools, libraries, parks. And part 2 of that is we need to put an age restriction on this of age 21. You're not going to take your kid to a strip club. Mm-hmm. So why would you allow this to happen in a private business or wherever? And
common sense there, Tyler.
And it's a shame that we're even having to talk about this. So key leaders of our state legislators called me, and they loved the idea. They said, Tyler, 90% of North Carolinians probably agree with you on this, if not higher. We love this, and we will start going to work on this probably first of next year. So I'm sure you will see more down the road with that. We do have support. As far as we know, we could be the first state that legislates on this. So it could trigger other states all around the country. So that's how God works. He used us to protest on Saturday. That led to Sunday's cancellation, led to Monday's letter to the legislators, and this could go nationwide.
That honestly would be so cool, because I think this goes beyond drag queen story hour. Like, for example, and this is my own personal belief here, is that like pride parades is explicitly for celebrating sexuality and for people to do things that they ought not to probably be doing in a public area. Children should not be able to go to an event like that. I don't know if you saw, Libs of TikTok actually posted a video at the Charlotte Pride Parade of this little boy. I don't know if you saw it on the strip pole with the stripper, and it's like, why are children at these events? But of course, children being there is the whole point. And for the Drag Queen Story Hour, I don't know if you did or not, but I ended up going to the website. I was like, I want to see what they're actually saying. And they're clear. They don't hide it. they don't hide it, that they're like, yeah, we want to teach your kids about sexuality. Like, that's basically what it says right on the front. So they're not hiding their agenda. So at this point, I think for anyone who's Republican, and not just Republican, because
Yeah,
what
has
you're saying
morals.
here,
Anybody has
Tyler,
morals.
it's
Yeah.
common sense. Like you could be a moderate, an independent, and be like, wait, I don't want my kids seeing a drag queen story hour. I don't want this being snuck into the schools without me knowing, right? And so this is an issue that a lot of people can get on board with, and I hate that it has to even become kind of this Republican issue. I think it's just a culture issue in general, and I think what you're doing is good, because we were trying to figure out too legislatively, because they're like, okay, if we get rid of this one drag queen story hour, okay, cool, but what about the next one that pops up, right? And the next one and the next one, what are we going to be able, to do about that? And I know Connor had a lot of thoughts on it as well, because I was pretty livid, Tyler. I was pretty upset, as you were, I'm sure.
Yeah, I was pretty upset. I think, Tyler, you mentioned it for sure, is that you would not take your kids. You cannot take your kids to a strip club. But yet they allow this type of stuff, which is a very similar transaction of money and performance with the removal of clothes. They may not be going down to the level of what strippers are, but it's certainly past any type of regular restaurant or any other like public facing event that you would have.
Absolutely.
Although, like I said, I guess there's a few Super Bowl performances we could throw up there as well. But I mean,
But
No,
the
go ahead.
neighboring county, I'll give you an example. The neighboring county, how big of a deal this was that it got removed from the park. The neighboring county is one of the most conservative counties in the country, or in the state at least. Union County. There was a group
Mm-hmm.
that protested with us on Saturday that also went to Union County on Sunday, and that performance went through in that public park in Union County. So, to give you an idea how big of a deal it was that we got it canceled in the park in Mecklenburg County, a big deal. And we, like I said, we were outnumbered. I know there are there should have been 1,000 of us out there protesting. But what I've learned through this whole stage of running for Congress is people agree with me, but they're not willing to take the heat. It's like, well, I don't want the media posting me, or I don't know, I don't want my friends to reject me, or I might get fired from my job. And I'm like, so are those idols in your life? Is that what comes first? You have a country and your kids to protect here. What is your priorities in life at this point? There's no more time. We don't have time to be hot or cold anymore. Or I'm sorry, cold. You either have to be hot or just get out of the way at this point. I mean, there's no in between anymore. It's really not. And so I'm just kind of fed up with lukewarm people who won't even get out there and willing to sacrifice anything. People have become so accustomed to an 8 to 5 job, come home and eat and watch Netflix, and that's why they don't realize these things are happening in our country, because they have all these other distractions. Well, life is good. It's not really harming me. But yeah, what about, goes back to the crime we talked about. If your family member's killed in your backyard, I'm sure it becomes an issue for you. So, at what point do you stand up? And that's where I have a problem with many Republicans, especially our local Republicans. None of them stood with me, and it didn't surprise me. I called them out the night before and said, "Are you going to be there?" And I knew what the answer was. Um, and that's why they've lost elections for the last decade in this area, because they're weak. They haven't stood up for anything. If you're going to try to cater to everybody, you're going to lose. And that's what's happening. So I just, even internally, my team was like, hey, maybe you shouldn't touch this subject. I said, nope, we're going after this. There's kids' lives at stake here. And so be it if I lose an election. Who cares? Right? I mean, at the end of the day, who cares? How many lives could have been saved on that Sunday when we had it removed from the park? Because what we've seen is 52% in 2020, 52% of trans kids attempted or wanted to commit suicide. Those are staggering numbers. And my opponent supports that. You can go on Planned Parenthood's website right now. I posted a reel on Instagram about this. You go on Planned Parenthood's website and schedule a hormone therapy session and get the puberty blockers. And who's that funded by? Our taxpayer dollars. And that is enabling these children to go through have these surgeries, and then by the time they reach an adult age, they're like, what have I done? And they don't know who they are, and they have suicidal thoughts, or they commit suicide. And that is what the left is doing. That's what the enemy is doing. And that is why this is a big deal to me. So be it if I lose an election. How many lives could be saved when the state legislators, act on this and prohibit this from happening in public places? I mean, that's millions of lives. And if others, over time, and if other states jump on board with this, I mean, who knows the eternal impacts that it will have.
Yeah, and you're starting to see a little bit of a movement here with in regards to like transgenderism and whole drag queen story hour, calling it I'll call it sexual indoctrination, where you are starting to very slowly see some movement. I think there is a slight role that started with Glenn Youngkin. That Virginia race was very interesting for a lot of us because he won, and it was because of an issue of transparency in a Loudoun County school in regards to a boy that dressed as a girl in the bathroom. And so I would definitely agree with you that Republicans have not come out to vote like they should, and I think there's a certain level of complacency and comfortableness that they have, where you're kind of right, where everyone kind of lives in their own world and they don't really see what's going on or they don't want to. But we are seeing, I think we're starting to see a movement in regards to transgenderism. Because if you think about it, like transgenderism, as far as I know, I started to be something I heard more about around 2015, 2016. And then you have these kids that are on, hormones, right? On hormone blockers, things like that. Well, now it's about 6 years later, and now we're starting to see the effects of what happens. It's the most cruel experiment that's ever been done on our children, and they can never go back. And you're right, Todd. The stories, they're just horrible, and they don't know who they are, and they're even more confused than when they started off on their gender journey or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, they just say, be whoever you feel. Well, that's just not how it works. Every day, I don't feel like getting up to go to work every day, but we have to do it. I mean, you can't always trust your feelings, They can lead you astray. And that's what the left is pushing, is be whatever you feel. But the funny thing is, 2 years ago, they're saying, trust the science, trust the science. Well, if you trust the science, all you got to do is open your pants, and whatever you have down there is what you are. That's the science. But yet they say,
Yeah.
oh, you can be whatever you feel like, and it's creating huge problems. And again, now, because politicians have failed about being proactive, now I'm having to step up and run for Congress and be reactive to their problems. And I expect thousands more in the next election cycle in 2024 to step up and run for Congress and help us out, and try to put a stop to all this.
Yeah, for sure, Connor.
Yeah, so it sounds like I've definitely been vocal about Republicans being pretty lackadaisical as far as policy and like what they've let liberals, or at this point the progressive wave, get away with, is they've just kept pushing. It started with losing with Roe v. Wade probably 50 years ago. It might even go back before that, but for me, that's usually what I look at. And ever since then, Republicans have just been losing ground and never really pushing back. Like the spines are not there. And the first time that we ever saw anybody show up with any spines, at least in my lifetime, was during Trump's presidency. And he was a brand new Republican. But I mean, as a classic liberal, I think I would probably label him more of that. He just kind of recognized where the country was going. That it was more take from the left, and the right was not putting up a fight. And I think that has largely brought down to people like you, people like Glenn Youngkin, who've just said, "I've had enough. I'm getting into this." But it doesn't sound like you think the country's beyond saving at this point.
It's getting close. Like I said, a couple more election cycles. If people don't step up, we don't have much time. And then when people realize it, it'll be too late. There won't be anything that we can do. So we are the last stand for freedom. America is, and there's nobody come to save us at this
Mm-hmm.
point. And so I don't know what it's going to take, but we know where the radical left stands, and the problem is Republicans always give them, you give the left an inch and they take like 10 miles. And
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
now we're where we are because they keep pushing. Well, accept me because I'm gay. Okay, well, now accept me. I want to change my gender. And then who knows what the next thing is,
Oh,
right?
they're down.
And
They're down to maps now. Minor attracted persons. Accept me. Accept the fact that I like to be with little children sexually. Yeah, that's where it's
it's
evolved. And the slippery slope concept is where we started out. 20 years ago or so, and we were laughed at for saying such a thing. And while some of the stuff kind of made sense, and Republicans just kind of were like, we're going to stay in our lane. Just leave us alone. Stay in your lane. We'll leave you alone. Well, now they haven't.
and they don't. They won't stay in their lane. The radical left wants to take ground, and all we're doing is just say, leave us alone. But you've put us in this position. You've asked for this now. There are people
Mm-hmm.
like me all over this country who have had enough, and more are coming. I can assure you, more will be coming down the pipeline. So this is what you get, for pushing too much. Um, I just wanted to be left alone. I wanted to stay in the business world, but now you got me, and I'm not going anywhere, and I will make a lot of noise, and I'm definitely a fighter. I've proven that the last year and a half on many occasions, and I'm not going anywhere.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Do you think with the polarization between the two parties, and honestly, not just the two parties at this point, but the cultures of the two parties, do you think that we could look at some sort of a splitting of America? It's trended quite a bit over the last couple of years. People asking for some sort of a divorce, but it's not as simple as the Mason-Dixon line in the North and the South anymore. It is very very spotty between the states and which way they lean culturally. But I'm curious if you've given that any thought to what might happen if some states started trying to just pull out of America.
I've never given thought to that. I don't have an answer for you there. It'd be interesting. Texas, you always hear about Texas
Yeah,
doing its own
Texas.
thing,
Oh
but
yeah, they're
and
always gonna say they're leaving.
Florida, Florida could probably do its own thing, but I don't know. I don't see it. I could see a civil war breaking out in the next 10, 15 years if we keep going to this rate.
Okay, yeah.
If I mean, I don't
What
know. I
else do
don't
you
mean to
do with
sound like I
cultures
can't
that are
steer.
just at each other's throats all the time?
I mean, and I think that's what they're afraid of. That's why they want to take your guns, because the politicians don't like the Second Amendment. They politicians want to play the role of God, so they want to remove God and they want to remove guns. Those are the two things that get in the way of them having ultimate control, is God and guns, and that's why they come after them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we know that they can't completely remove God from us.
No,
But that being said, we saw a lot of churches roll over belly up during COVID and just went with it. Just
yeah,
completely gave up.
it exposed them, and it really, the last 2 years, I would say, as terrible as COVID was to have to deal with and go through all that, it exposed people. That's the
Mm-hmm.
thing. It exposed you. You can't hide anymore. We know where you stand, and so it created a new wave of people like me who just have had enough, and like I said, I expect more of that. But we can't win if people don't show up to vote. If they're too comfortable and sit at home, nothing will change. I can sit out here and want to change the world every day, but if people don't show up and vote for us, it's just not going to happen. So
Yeah.
it concerns me now. There's no better time than now. Everything is going our way. Being an outsider, having no political background, the way the map was drawn, I have a weak opponent who goes with the Biden Pelosi agenda. I mean, you couldn't ask for an easier opponent. So I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take to get people off their couch.
Yeah. What would you say to the voters out there who think that their vote just doesn't really count for that much, especially for those who, maybe not necessarily part of North Carolina, but those who live in states where they're particularly ratioed when it comes to the opposing party? I used to live in upstate New York. And during, I think it was during Obama, I remember looking at the counts and it was like 7-1 or 8-1. I was outnumbered for my vote. So I didn't feel like my vote counted for anything up there because there was just no way it was going to flip like that.
Well, you keep chipping away. Like I said earlier, you have to know it's a long game at this point. Democrats are really good about playing the long game. They're not
Mm-hmm.
playing 1 or 2 years; they're playing 20 years, and so it's got to be the same thing. We've lost all this ground, so when you're outnumbered like that, you just almost have to let the Democrats just implode on themselves and ruin these cities where people just say, I've had enough, I've seen enough, and it gets them to vote for the other side. It goes in cycles. And
Mm-hmm.
so over time, I expect some of these cities to go back red because they just see that Democrat policies are just fail. They fail people. Look at all these big cities all around the country that are blue. Homelessness, crime, everything's out of control. They're dirty, and people are moving away from those cities. They're not the cities that they knew 20, 30 years ago. And so that's the thing is just I commend the people that stay behind in those cities and they don't flee them because they can keep chipping away at it. As for voting, the biggest thing that people ask me this: how can we make sure that our elections are secure? Be a poll observer on election day.
Mm-hmm.
Go and be a poll observer. Volunteer. Talk to your local GOP or whomever it is, and become a poll observer. And if you see shady stuff, you let somebody know. And I'm sure they have attorneys and people that they'll be in touch with. I believe that's what's happening here in North Carolina is they have attorneys ready to go on election day. If there's any sketchy activity, they can turn them in for it.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you a question about what you feel like North Carolina's political landscape looks like in regards to Republican, Democrat, Independent. What are your thoughts on that?
I've gotten a few answers on this. When I meet an unaffiliated, I always ask, why are you an independent? What is it? And I'll tell you what I get out of District 12. Trump, it's very split. They either love or they hate him in
Mm.
District 12. Or they're an unaffiliated because they say, the Republicans have just been weak. I don't like associating with them. That's another one. Abortion is a big one right now. I was kind of surprised, but the Republican Party is split on that. And I think
Hmm.
I think that it's social pressure. I think that politicians feel like they're going to lose on that topic, so they stay away from it. They don't want to talk about it. And so I think it's more social pressure. But honestly, I think there's more pro-life people than there are pro-choice. Just in my opinion. But I hear that people are independents just because of that, the social pressure. It seems so. Those are the three main things that I see. We have more independents in this state than we do of either party, and so it's really interesting. So there's a big group that we have some swing voters there, and most of them that we're talking to are going to vote Republican. So we need to pick up a little bit. Some weak Democrats that might have voted Republican in the past. We're chipping away at that. We do these community cookouts starting this month where we're going into the minority communities that the Republicans have ignored.
Mm-hmm.
They've
Yeah.
never gone into these communities and just loved on these people because the black community is fed up with these failed economic policies that Biden is pushing. So, Trump, Youngkin, all made headway into the minority communities, and we're doing the same thing. We have a huge minority um, voting base in our district, and we're chipping away at that. And it's not to earn votes. I mean, it is, but it isn't. I mean, I truly love people, and I want to see them break free of all this that they've been just lied to for decades, that the Democrats have used them for. And so I just want them to experience that freedom that I have and many others have. So we're going into those communities and we're chipping away at that the next few weeks.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And it's funny you talk about independents and conservatives. I'm going to call out Connor. So Connor you're a registered independent, right, Connor?
An affiliate and independent, kind of the same thing, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's an independent, and I'm a conservative, so I'm registered Republican, and I've thought a couple times at least about changing to independent, and I think what you said about social pressure is correct, and I think there's this odd divide. It's not odd; it actually makes sense. There's a divide between in the Republican Party regarding Trump. Like there's people I've noticed that there's plenty of Republicans that are like, hey, we like the policies that he made, but we do think he was a bit brash and he spoke a little too much. But give us Trump over Biden any day, right? And then there's people who are just so for Trump. He can do no wrong, he can be no wrong, and so there's kind of this odd divide that's happened between them, and they kind of I feel there's some Republicans that feel a little bit lost, if I'm making any sense. I don't know why
Yeah.
Connor is independent, but I should probably know why he's independent. I don't, um, but that's just been something that I've noticed as I've just talked to people, and also seen their Facebook posts. The Facebook posts definitely help figure out where they're at.
Yeah, and that's what we hear on the ground. A lot of people um, like Ron DeSantis. I mean, they like his
Hmm.
policies and they like that he's bold, but they don't like, and they like that he's not as brash, I guess, or narcissistic, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, so that's what I've found, and just talking to tens of thousands of voters the last year and a half, especially since Trump's been out of office now for what 2 years or so, almost. So I think people have kind of grown accustomed to that. But it goes back to what you said, Jordan. They would rather have him over Biden any day. But it's like, do we have somebody that's a fighter like him, but maybe not as narcissistic would be the word that I hear.
Sure.
Um, but if he was the one on the ticket, absolutely they'd vote for him because they don't want to pay $4, $5, $6 gallon gas. But I think that's the divide, at least in District 12. Now maybe you get out in the more rural areas, the Trump endorsement helps you. But District 12, it's such a divide. He's not as welcome here by
Mm.
Republicans.
Yeah, and that certainly doesn't surprise me. But I want to switch gears from I guess talking a bit more locally. I was looking at some of your points, and specifically wanted to talk about probably some a bit hotter topics, specifically very quickly because I don't want to take up too much of your time. But we have the topic of Israel, and we have the topic of China. So we know that Trump was very hard on China. And it kind of seems like Biden is a little bit looser. And so you kind of talk a little bit about China on your website. Can you just kind of explain your viewpoints on that and what we should be doing with China as they've kind of become a threat, at least, to America?
Yeah, they are. I mean, they are becoming one of the superpowers for sure. They want to take over the reins, and we have allowed them to do so. Especially the Democrats. They are buying up land in this country. They control everything. The chips. I saw a story the other day and looked it up and did some digging, but Ford Motor Company is putting a lot of their Ford F-150s out at the Kentucky Motor Speedway because they don't have chips for them. So there's, I don't know how many tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of brand new Ford F-150s sitting out there because they don't have chips for them because they are manufactured overseas. So I'm a big proponent of bringing many of these businesses back to the states so we can create jobs and kind of have a control on what's going on right here within our borders. So China definitely has to be held accountable. They steal a lot of our intellectual property and they're not held accountable for that. So China is a huge threat, and Biden, a lot of his friends are in the Chinese government, and he's very friendly with them, so they get away with it. They knew not to mess with Trump when he was the president, but they knew when some weaker leadership came in, they could get away with a lot more. So we have to hold them accountable.
And in regards to, I guess, your Republican colleagues or how you see the Republican Party, where do you think Republicans really stand as a whole on China? Like, if we're given the power to do anything, do you think that they'll actually do something about China?
They didn't when Trump was president, as far as I know. So I think that's a pretty big indicator of what leadership thinks. I mean, again, many of them talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. So I think we'll have a better indication of where people stand in 2024. We'll see who, I expect the Republicans should take back the White House. Hopefully, we take back the House and the Senate this go round in 2022. So we'll start knowing where people stand in 2024. And then by the 2026 election cycle, I expect that's when we know who to weed out.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I said we've got to play a longer game here. Give me some time to figure out who's who and who's really doing what they need to be doing and who's not, and start exposing them and finding new people to replace them.
Yeah. No, that's good. I think you're probably one of the first people that's actually brought up 2026. Most of us only think in terms of 2022 and 2024. I think part of that is because we are in kind of a miserable state with Biden, where we just are so ready to get rid of him. I think both the Democrats and the Republicans would like to get rid of Biden at
hmm
this point. But I think I like what you're saying about kind of taking that longer approach, and even talking about 2026 is definitely an indicator of that. Connor.
Yeah, no, I think he answered my questions on China and just the way that they're pushing their weight around with Taiwan. Taiwan's the one that is I think more than 90% of the high end computer chips that you were talking about, which
Mhm.
China's been very aggressive about making sure that they know that they're part of their territory. But I mean, speaking of overseas conflicts, what are your thoughts on the current developments and even the last couple of days with Ukraine and Russia and NATO's official response? And I think Poland has requested nuclear assistance from the U.S. at this point, actually.
Yeah, I tell you, it's sad that people are caught in the middle of this. Innocent citizens are caught in the middle of these globalists that are fighting these battles against each other. That's what it comes down to. For me, I'm sick and tired of every week reading that Congress has sent, X billion dollars over to Ukraine when they can't even secure our own border. So again, that goes back to the
Mm.
America first.
Mm-hmm.
We have problems to deal with over here. We don't need to be the world's police at this point. Until they start messing with us, I think we just need to mind our own business. I hate it for all those innocent citizens over there,
For sure.
but we just keep funneling money over there. And I tell you what, I would love to see where that money is earmarked, because I can guarantee you, if they're going to send billions of dollars, a small percentage makes it to Ukraine. Most of the time, I'd say the politicians, government contractors, everybody's making money on this war, and that's why they keep on. They're essentially laundering money for that reason. They're able to make money off of war, and that's why politicians push for war, because people get rich in war, but
Yep,
but
they make the
innocent
money.
lives are lost, and that's the problem, and that's where I have a problem with it. So I wouldn't fund these endless wars unless they come after us on our own soil. I think it's between them.
Yeah, and I would say I heard an example the other day, but I mean, realistically, America has implicated ourselves in this overseas conflict at this point by funding. Somebody gave the example that you've got Putin that's over there who's picked a fight, but now he's got a third party that is supplying who he's picked a fight with. They're supplying them with ammo, with weapons, with trucks, with money. It's like, he's not going to leave them alone. If you got a chance to take, if you're going to go after one of them, now you got to go after both of them. So I think at this point we are probably already caught up in this.
Yeah.
But we enjoyed 4 years of no more wars with Trump, and Biden in less than half of his term has already stepping us into what might be one of the biggest ones we've seen as of recent.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gonna implicate so many innocent people.
It's sad. It's sad, but politicians just don't care about people's lives, and this is what they do. They'll do whatever it takes to make a buck.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. pretty much always about money. As every time I look down at it, I'm like, oh, it's money. It's a money motivation, which is kind of unfortunate. It's just
Yeah,
that simple.
follow the money. So, hard question for you, Tyler. How will you avoid getting bought out?
Mm.
Well, that goes to a short term in Congress, a shorter term, having good accountability. I have some great people around me who know where my weaknesses lie. And so I've built those groups of individuals who have free reign over my life and can ask the tough questions and meet with me on a weekly basis. So that's what it comes down to, is personal accountability.
Mhm.
Again, I didn't want the job in the first place. I'm honored to do it, but it's hard to buy somebody off who's not just desperate for power and for money. That is not something that is an idol in my life that I really want. I've been blessed at an early age to have access to power and money early on, and in I stayed straight then, and I intend to continue doing that now. So I think God was warming me up to this, over 15 years ago, and I want to honor that and stay on the right path.
Yeah, I
Mm.
certainly appreciate the honesty there. As that's kind of probably my main concern for anybody coming into any sort of power is just, I mean, it doesn't have to be government; it can be corporate too. It's just
Yeah.
what happens where you become so corrupt. We've watched this whole debacle with Twitter and Elon Musk going back and forth. Which, by the way, I think he owns it now at this point.
Oh, that must have
Yeah,
been a recent
that was
development.
that. No, that was like yesterday.
I saw that.
Oh,
I saw that.
Yeah, just
Hopefully people get to speak freely again, and we've been censored on all of our social media.
mhm.
oh,
So,
really?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
So let's touch on that a little bit. What type of censorship have you guys been finding? Just that your posts aren't getting views, or your accounts are being taken down. What type of stuff have you been encountering?
Primarily, the one that censors me the most is Instagram. Facebook has actually not throttled us down. Every now and then, depending on what we say, we
Mm-hmm.
can see a clear difference. Instagram is the consistent one where they've just killed my views. Um, when I went on the People's Convoy in February, our account blew up 10 times over. I think I'm over 16,000 followers now, and I started with 1,600. And I get less views now on my stories than I did when I had 1,600 followers. And
Wow.
Wow.
when I was posting the convoy, we saw. For those who don't know, there was a convoy that went from California to Washington D.C. in February, and it was to protest the national um, the state of emergency
Mm-hmm.
that I was talking about
Mm.
earlier, where
Right at the
Congress
border.
and Biden are just pushing stuff through and there's no accountability. And so we were 70 miles long at one point, thousands of trucks and vehicles and campers, and we saw a million or so people on every overpass from California to DC. It was the most incredible thing I've ever seen, and so once Instagram started figuring out we were on this, they throttled us down. I mean, our views were just out the roof, and they throttled me. And now we barely get any interaction on our post. I mean, you can see it, um, and that's what they've done.
Mm-hmm.
Twitter's the same way. And last night we lost 10 followers and then we gained 12 back today. It was so weird. And it didn't
On
even
Twitter.
notify me that, yeah, it's just like up and down the last 24 hours since Elon announced that he's going to buy it. But
Mm-hmm.
Facebook's been pretty good. They're not as consistent on throttling us. It just depends on what they say, what we say or do.
There's probably a larger conservative base on Facebook, since it is kind of the older generation social media. So I mean, you're talking ad revenue there for
Yeah,
a lot of
exactly.
it. Where
But
Instagram's
Instagram's the one where we've censored it. Also, our emails get censored, and
really.
and even my text messaging on my personal phone has been censored.
Wait, well, can you get a little bit into the email situation? This has been something that's been
Yeah.
popping up a little bit recently.
Who's the email provider?
Gmail.
Ah,
We use
Mm,
G Suite.
there it is.
okay.
There it is.
And
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean,
phone.
surprise, but phone, which is surprising to me, but iMessage and stuff sometimes,
Hmm.
and it has nothing to do with service or carrier issues, but it's been consistent, on some things. So it's been really interesting the last year and a half to watch that. When I first started, our website was McAfee listed
Okay.
us as
Yep.
it could be threatening to you if you visited our site. So we had to put in a work order for that, and then they cleared us. But we think that was a target initially because it was so odd. We had some programmers or guys that know all that stuff on the back end look at everything. They say this should not be flagged. You're in the clear. So we had to put in a work order McAfee. So anything
Hmm.
conservative is a tougher battle for us for sure.
Well, I mean, certainly the part of you being having an early background in Boy Scouts, where you're in your highest rank of Eagle Scouts. I mean, that is certainly threatening material to me.
Right.
Yeah, that's just crazy.
Hmm.
I think even at one point with our, at least with our website, people do get a warning that they're going to. I don't even know what it is, but just like a more dangerous site or something like that. Like, you sure you want to go here? And so we've started to get those too, and we're pretty small, so I can't imagine the amount of censorship that you have, especially with email. That's the one
Yeah.
that
Emails.
gets me a little bit
That's actually a new one for me to hear that.
It does. Yeah,
because
they do. It'll send it to spam. I
Hmm.
just had
Okay.
someone the other day that I emailed, and they were like, "I didn't get your email." I said, "Check your spam," and they checked it, and there it was. And it's just a normal account, through our votetylerlee.com. It's one of our accounts, and they they marked it as spam.
Yeah, that could also be done if I recall correctly, because a lot of it is done by data collection across devices. So if people are, I mean, technically you could get candidates like just kind of like either review bombing, which I think is a funny thing, but review bombing or everybody going and reporting. Like you could get a whole movement that comes and gets on your Facebook profile
Hmm.
and reports you for whatever they want to report you for. And that could automatically trigger Facebook systems to remove your account or lock it up until you reinstate it. And I wonder if it's possible that that could be kind of a digital, anti-campaign against you, where people could be signing up, getting your emails, and then marking it as spam. And eventually, the Google systems will think this is spam, and it's just going to
Well, let me
automatically
clarify.
filter it out.
No, it's not a mass email account. We do have
Okay,
one of those, and that does go to spam. But it was
it's your like
it's
specific
a
your
yeah.
email.
Oh yeah,
Ooh,
yeah.
okay.
It happens. Yeah. So they definitely they target us. They're pushing the limits there. So you'd think if somebody opts into your emails, speaking on a mass level, we have mass emails that go out. If somebody opts in, they're saying, "I want to receive your emails." Well, why would you censor that? So
Hmm.
they just don't want the message getting out there, and that's what we deal with as conservatives right now until we get a hold of that. And media does the same thing. You read an article about me, be very very, very leftist. I mean, they're very against us. The way they word everything and call us bigots, or we hate, or we don't love this person because we disagree with their lifestyle. Well, that's not true. If my niece is going to run out in front of a bus and playing in the street, of course I'm going to save her because I see better than she does. I understand that that can hurt her. So it doesn't mean I don't love her, but that's what the left will try to do is, well, you disagree with me so you hate me. And no, that's what you're saying. I'm not saying that. I love you as an individual. And
Hmm.
that's what they use. That's how they promote that stuff. It's really a shame, but we have to not be concerned with what people think anymore. It always sounds like, this is what I've learned, especially the last few weeks with the drag queen story hour. It always seems like more people are against you than it really is. It's because there's a small minority of people that are screaming, "Oh, you hate the transgender movement. You hate these people," and you've got the media that is echoing that and pushing this, and so it always sounds like it's larger than what it really is. So that's why I don't mind taking the heat, because again, it goes back to probably 90% of North Carolinians and Americans agree with my stance. So you just have to be able to, take a little bit of heat from the media.
Yeah, it almost kind of reminds me of like a situation where you think you're going up against a dragon and you're really scared and it's hiding in the cave, and then you get there and it's kind of more of a lizard that has an echo when it speaks. I feel like that's kind of what the left does, but it's working though, because we're too scared to approach them. But I think that if you have enough people, um, you can make that change and it can happen.
Hmm.
But like you just kind of circling back, not the same way Jen Psaki does, but circling back to what you said in the very beginning, is that you can't do it on your own. You're not going to save America on your own. You are acting as a representative, right? Which means that there are people behind you, and so I think if if Republicans can get anything from this conversation or anything just from the culture in general, is to get out there and not just vote, because I think that there's plenty of people that vote and have no idea who they're voting for. I have
Absolutely.
done this before. I have totally done this, guilty as charged. I will probably never end up doing that again. But like, know who you're voting for, know your beliefs, and get people into office that represent your beliefs. And
Hmm.
vote for the ones that represent your beliefs. That's a big part of it. It annoys me sometimes. I'm annoyed with myself, and then kind of annoyed that we just kind of sit here and do nothing. But we're glad that you're stepping up to the plate, even though I know you said that you don't want it, but I know that you're very honored to be doing this, and we appreciate you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I hope nobody takes that I don't want it. It's just it was not a dream of mine initially. So, and that's what God does. He calls you to do something. When you start getting too comfortable, he pulls you out of it. And I would have never imagined to be in this role. So I tell people anybody can do it, because I didn't even know what what the role was, that I was learning the role as we were going. What does the house do? We learned
Hmm.
surface
Hmm.
level growing up, but I mean, most people couldn't even tell you what district they live in. They're just like, I'm just going to show up and vote all red, or I'm going to show up and vote all blue. They don't even know what district they're in, and I get that because I was there a year and a half ago. I never showed up for anything but the presidential elections, and now I will never,
Hmm.
never miss another election. And I can tell you where
Hmm.
the real power is on the local and state level. If anything, those are
Yep.
the most important elections to
Hmm.
vote in, but they have the least amount of turnout. But that's really where all the power is. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
people should not see much of me. We need to roll the federal government out of people's lives. So if they don't see me, that's probably a good thing. But
Yeah.
local and state is where the power is.
Yeah, I mean, you said something though that's very interesting, that you shouldn't be seen. Politicians have become celebrities, which I
Hmm.
think has contributed to that money hungry mentality. So I think that is a good thing that politicians, you're representing the people, you're doing a work. You're not there to be on the cover of a magazine. So that's good stuff. That's good stuff to hear. Wait, Connor, do you have any questions? Because I was going to ask a question, but if you had something, then
No, no, you're good. You're not going to be stepping on my toes.
okay. So my question for you, I guess, kind of as we wrap up, is what would be your message to those who would typically vote Democrat? And what would your message be for those who typically would vote Republican or unaffiliated independent?
Yeah, to the Democrats, I would say you have to give a hard look at this and say, is my life better? Truly, is my life better than it was 2 years ago? And I think if they were honest with themselves, they would probably say, no, it's not. I'm paying $4 a gallon for gas, or my 401k is half of what it was, or you name it. I mean, there's issue after issue. And different issues affect different people. There's rich people right now that $4 gallon of gas doesn't affect them. But my opponent said one time in a forum that I was in with her, she said, well, Tyler doesn't care about the poor women and children. Okay, well, gas prices alone, if you're rich and can afford $4 gallon of gas, great, good for you. But there are single mothers out there who are now having to get 2 or 3 jobs to pay for basic essentials, groceries, gas. So when my opponent would say something like Tyler doesn't care about poor women and children, well, that's not true, because I don't want you paying $3 or $4 a gallon of gas. I want you to pay $1 a gallon of gas, or even less. If we bring it all back to the states, bring it back to our right here within our borders, we get gas prices down, and that helps everybody out. That also brings down the cost of food, because these trucks have to ship food. Gas prices affect everything. That's how we can cut immediate costs. And so that's a big one. I would ask Democrats, take a look, or go back to the crime issue. If your child was killed in your backyard, you would really start taking a look at crime and a police force. What can we do to get more police on, in our city? So every issue has its different effects on people, but I would ask Democrats, take a look at the issue that you're most concerned with, and then say, am I better off now than I was 2 years ago? And I'd say they're probably not. Unaffiliated, again, it goes back to what I said earlier about Trump. There's a split in District 12. The policies worked. If you didn't like the man for who he was, I understand. I would say I would never raise my kids to be narcissistic and act like that. Okay? But the policies worked. So don't label me or somebody else a Trumpster just because I agree with America First policies. So really give that a hard look, and then ask yourself again, am I better off now than I was 2 years ago? And then to the Republicans, you've got to get out there and vote. You've got to be courageous. Courage is contagious, so stand up. I mean, people will get in line and get behind you. We need more voices. So that's my message to those 3 different types of voters.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent message, especially as we begin to wrap up and end on. Jordan, did you have anything else to follow up on there?
No, that I think he did that very well, so I have nothing.
Perfect, dude. Tyler, I think that's a perfect message out for all 3 political mindsets there. Where can people find out more about you, or contact you, or find your social media handles?
Yeah, you guys can learn more about us it's votetylerlee.com. All of our social media is there. We'd love for you to get involved. There's many ways to get involved. We're like a church. There's 2 things we need: money and volunteers. And so, you can phone bank. It's super easy. You can do it right from your home, right on your computer. You just push a button and it dials, 10 people at a time, and that gets the message out. You can door knock with us. We have lots of things that we could get you involved in. We've only got 4 weeks, so if we could get 3 to 5 hours of your time in the next 4 weeks, I mean, that's not a lot to ask, and it would really push us over the line. Or contribute to the campaign with a donation. When you don't accept money from leadership and people that are going to have strings attached, we rely on the American voter to contribute. So you can find everything on our website, votetylerlee.com. But I appreciate you guys having us on. Means a lot, and I'm here for the people. So if they have any questions, reach out to us on our website.
That's fantastic, Tyler. We will certainly be looking to see how your race continues to go. And we wish you all the luck, as you're the type of person that we want to see getting in. We want citizens to be getting involved. No more, to the end of their days, politicians that stay in there for years, as we just start to bring in just new faces. So thank you so much for running and coming on here with us. And you can find us, Resident Skeptics, on Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. Other than that, you can visit us at residentskeptics.com. Tyler, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.